Welcome back to Spilling Tea. Before we get into today's episode, I want to say something clearly. While episode one focused on patterns that we've seen more commonly in men, those dynamics aren't exclusive to men. A listener actually pointed that out to me last week, and he was right to do that. There are some women who show up that way too, and some of you may have heard yourselves in it. This isn't about labeling genders, it's about naming behaviors that show up in relationships. This isn't a counter argument, it's a continuation. So if part one felt validating, it's because it names something real. How people quietly dismantle intimacy through emotional disengagement, through avoidance and entitlement to access without participation. And if you listened and thought, yeah, but that's not the whole story, you're right. Because relationship breakdown doesn't belong to one side, it belongs to pain that goes unexamined on both sides. In part one, we talked about what happens when someone withdraws emotionally while still expecting closeness with their partner. This episode picks up from there because when one person stops showing up, something shifts in the other person too. And it doesn't happen dramatically, it happens slowly, subtly, convincingly, and often justifiably. Because entitlement doesn't always look like demand. Sometimes it looks like pain that was never fully processed and it's quietly turning into control. And this matters for one reason. Most relationships don't end because one person failed. They end because both people started protecting themselves in ways that made connection impossible. Men typically disengage, women typically harden. Men often avoid presence, while women often weaponize absence. And each side tells the same story. I'm just reacting, never realizing that they're also contributing. And that's where we're going today. So let's dive in. Let's start where when being hurt turns into control and how entitlement can grow from that place. You didn't wake up one day wanting power like Skeletor from the He-Man series. You woke up tired. You kept getting let down over and over again. You were the one holding things together, the one paying attention to how everything felt. You tried to explain yourself carefully, hoping this time you'd finally be understood. You stayed hopeful longer than your mind and body could carry until it started to wear you down in ways that you couldn't ignore. You gave love long past the point where it was being returned. And somewhere in that, you began to lose pieces of yourself. And that part matters. But while all of that was happening, something subtle started to shift. Pain stopped being something that you were experiencing and it started becoming something that you were standing on. I've been hurt slowly turned into I don't have to meet you where you are anymore. Exhaustion became leverage, resentment became justification, and history became a reason not to reflect. And here's why that's so hard to see because pain sounds like truth, it feels like truth, and it carries authority. So nobody questions it, not your friends, not your family, not your therapist, not even you. The story becomes airtight. I already tried. I already gave it my all. I already did the work. And maybe you did. But here's the turn that no one likes to look at. Pain doesn't just protect you from getting hurt again, it can keep you stuck, avoiding accountability, and pushing away the very love that you say that you want. And once that happens, something changes in how you show up. You stop asking, how am I showing up for my partner right now? How does my distance affect them? Am I still participating or am I just reacting? Without realizing it, you stop relating with your partner and you start relating from your wound. That partner may be paying for past mistakes from a previous partner. And from there, distance feels justified, detachment feels earned, and responsibility, it slowly disappears. And this is where it moves from internal to relational. Because when pain doesn't lead to leaving the relationship, it leads to adapting what's inside of the relationship. And adapting over time often turns into control. What goes unmet for long enough doesn't disappear, it evolves. Most of the time, pretty quietly, as protection, as hesitation, as guardedness. Because when someone has been hurt deeply, they don't just move forward. They start trying to stay one step ahead so they never get caught off guard again. And that changes everything about connection. It's no longer just about being with someone, it's about managing the risk of being hurt again. Reassurance becomes something that you try to secure instead of something that you naturally feel. Closeness becomes something that you monitor instead of something that you relax into. And slowly, almost without noticing, connection turns into strategy. And from there, another shift happens. Desire stops being shared and starts being controlled, not loudly, but subtly. Affection becomes measured. Warmth becomes selective. Presence becomes conditional. Closeness gets filtered through emotional math. Did you show up for me today? Did you disappoint me today? Did you earn this moment? And now intimacy isn't even an invitation, it's an evaluation. And the partner on the receiving end of this feels that, even if they can't explain it. They don't feel wanted. And that creates something very dangerous. It creates performance, not connection. Because nobody relaxes into intimacy when they're being graded. And over time, they stop reaching, they stop initiating, they stop risking, because being rejected hurts more than staying numb. And here's the irony: what started as protection ends up killing the very thing it was trying to preserve. And as this dynamic continues, another layer shows up. This beast is like an onion, there's so many layers to it. Let's talk about emotional expression, because there's something that gets confused all of the time. Feeling something is not the same as expressing it responsibly. Intensity is not depth. Loudness is not honesty. And unfiltered reactions are not vulnerability. Saying everything that you feel exactly when you feel it, without pause, without timing, or even care, that's not connection, that's discharge. And when one person is allowed to unload freely, the other is expected to absorb it, to translate it, to stay calm in the moment and not take it personally. And that message becomes very clear to them. My emotions take priority. Yours needs to adapt. And that doesn't build safety, it erodes it. Because emotional safety requires two things at once: expression and responsibility. Without both, closeness becomes something the other person braces for instead of something that they open to. And when safety starts to erode, communication changes too. It gets quieter, less direct, more assumed. This is where one of the most damaging beliefs shows up. If they cared, they'd already know. And once that belief sets in, the relationship stops being collaborative and starts becoming a test. Needs don't get shared, they get measured. Expectations aren't communicated, they're silently enforced. And every missed moment becomes evidence. And here's the trap: no one can meet expectations they were never given. So now the relationship turns into something impossible, a test for your partner that they didn't even know they were taking. And failure stops being information and becomes proof that they don't even care. And from there, connection collapses completely. And this leads to something even heavier: accountability imbalance. One person's emotions are treated as truth, while the other person's emotions are treated as problems. One person expresses, the other adjusts. One person stays positioned as right, while the other stays positioned as not enough. And over time, repair stops being mutual. It becomes correction, and that creates exhaustion because no one thrives in a space where they are constantly being measured. And eventually, they just stop trying altogether, not out of anger, but out of depletion. And this is where something important but often invisible happens. Effort doesn't escalate, it fades quietly, gradually. This isn't a fight anymore, it's resignation. They stopped initiating, they stopped sharing, they stopped reaching, not because they don't care, but because caring has become too risky for them. And from the outside, it looks like distance, but internally, it's learned helplessness. The belief becomes nothing I do here anymore makes a difference. Once that is learned by somebody, they don't fight for connection anymore. They just survive around it. Now, here's where it gets complicated because this often gets labeled as self respect. And yes, boundaries are very important and they're very necessary. Discernment is healthy, but entitlement is a completely different animal. It shows up when self respect becomes a shield against reflection. I deserve better becomes I don't need to look at my role anymore in this relationship. My standards are high becomes you should meet them. And slowly, protection replaces participation. And connection can't survive in that space. Why does this kill intimacy? Because intimacy requires something specific, not perfection, but mutual humanity. A space to fail, a space to repair, a space to be unfinished together. And power dynamics destroy all of that because when one person holds all of the authority, the other person feels behind. And desire cannot grow in imbalance. It needs safety. And safety requires two people, not a judge and not a defendant. So this episode isn't about accepting less. It's about seeing more, seeing where pain turned into control, where protection turned into distance, where entitlement quietly replaced participation. Because entitlement doesn't always look like asking for too much. Sometimes it looks like deciding you're done showing up while still expecting closeness with your partner, still expecting effort from your partner, and still expecting things to feel the way they did during that honeymoon phase that we all strive for. And that's where relationships quietly break. So please sit with that for the week, not to judge yourself, but to understand yourself. Because awareness changes everything. Because this isn't usually where relationships end. What comes next in the next episode is much quieter. It's more calculated. People don't always leave. Sometimes they engineer the ending instead. I have personal experience with this one. It's engineered not all at once, but slowly. They stop showing up, they stop trying, they stop being honest. And let's be honest, sometimes we don't end relationships. We make them so unbearable that somebody else has to do it. Not because we don't care, but because we don't want to be the one who chooses the ending. And that's what we're getting into next. Relationship sabotage. If this episode held up the mirror, the next one will show you what people do when they don't like what they see and still aren't ready to tell the truth. See you there. Have a great night.